we'll just start talking, and then how are you feeling after the clunge party?
Well, I didn't drink any clunge.
I drank quite a lot of clunge.
The clunge party was butters, but I have a very good feeling after leaving clunge because a certain Sophie Taylor said that I'm the best director Panto's ever had.
No, I mean, yeah, but Sophie Taylor...
How'd you like that clunge?
Well, I think Sophie Taylor was very drunk, and it was probably the clunge talking, let's be real. What was even in it? Like, it was a mixture between, like, orange and light brown.
I put in vodka, iron brew, and then there was apparently a lot of peach schnapps. When Lisa had it, it was very peachy.
Oh my god, it was very fruity. It was, considering how brown it looked, it was incredibly fruity tasting.
That's what they all say.
Oh, no. Hello, and welcome to Rory and Amber take a show up to Edinburgh Fringe.
Episode 3, directing.
Yes, a very tired episode 3, but we'll get through it. I think this is going to be quite a long one. So today, obviously, we're talking about directing, as Amber just said. We'll be going over a couple of things. Last time we did a podcast, talked about auditions.
Yeah.
So we're now at the point where we're going to assume that whoever's listening to this, if they're listening to it for guidance, because we are fountains of knowledge.
Of course.
Of course. At this point, you have a full and working cast. You know all the bits you want people to be playing. We're also going to assume you've got a fully edited script at this point. We'll do an episode on editing in a bit, but we just haven't actually...
Another time.
Another time. I don't know when that'll be, but we will do one on editing at some point in the future when we've actually edited it. So we're just going to assume that's all been done, and we're going to start off after the point where auditions have been done and people have been picked for parts, and that, the next stage, or at least that we normally do through PantoSoc, would be the read-through. So do you want to give a brief explanation about what a read-through is?
I mean, the clue's in the name.
All right.
But essentially... you're just going to get the whole cast together, have the directors there and producers. Typically, everyone gets given a script, which is quite nice because it's just something to keep. And you just read through it. The directors normally read in sort of stage directions, or a lot of our scripts tend to have like a few jokes sort of written into stage directions or descriptions of the scenery and things like that. And I mean, occasionally we'll fill in if someone couldn't come to the read-through, which is kind of fun. But yeah, you just kind of get everyone to get in character and give the script a go. It's also the first time anyone sees it, so they don't get to read it before the read-through, which makes it fun because they sort of like it's just all a bit of a fun surprise.
It's a little bit of a fun surprise, a little bit of a mess at times, because obviously I think with some jokes, like sometimes the comedic timing will just be completely off and stuff like that.
Yeah, because people have no idea what they're doing.
But it's quite fun as well to see how, especially after you've put people in a certain role, how then like the first time they're seeing it and they're reading the lines for it, how they then kind of interpret that. Yeah. And obviously it changes a lot before the final product, but it's just quite interesting to see what people bring to it for the first time. I think read through. They're definitely a good thing to do if possible. I mean, you could argue they're not completely necessary, but I think it just gets everybody into it, and it's like a really good starting point to kind of build up and develop from everything else that we're going to be talking about.
I mean, because obviously this one's about directing, like one of the important jobs that I think a director has is kind of bringing everyone together as well. Like, it's really nice to have everyone together for the read-through, because especially with Panto, you'll get a few new people who don't know anyone who's there. Yeah. And it's just nice to be able to also read your part and kind of get to see what lines you have. And especially for some people who might have come from school or like the Musical Theatre Society and they've never had lines before, they've only ever been chorus, it's just fun to be like, oh, I have this character now.
Well, I think from the society standpoint as well, it's like we got everybody in a room together, and you know, as you kind of go through the process, we'll talk about rehearsals in a bit, but in rehearsals you've only got obviously the people in that scene, so you don't really get to know everybody in the society, but it's really nice just kind of being able to see everybody in the read through, like the panto that we were just doing. That has now been cancelled, but discussion for another time. I remember because the people who are doing the narration scenes, there's about 4 of them who are doing the narration scenes, and it's just them in it. So it was really nice, and I'm not going to be seeing that until tomorrow when we do our
most of the time there's only ever 2 narrators. Yeah. So it's kind of fun in that those 2 people kind of get to hang out a lot with the director. Yeah. But it's also kind of sad because they don't really get to meet anyone else till the shows. Yeah. Like they literally do the read through, and then. And any dancers they might be in. I mean, a lot of the time narrators aren't in them.
Yeah, well, except for the finale. But again, we'll talk about that in a bit. But yes, read through, definitely something worth considering doing once you've got your cast together. And I think more than anything, they're just really funny as well. Because, I mean, what was it? There was the first, the read through before last we did, and I couldn't say Trapes.
Oh my god.
Never seen it written down before in my life.
So he sort of said like trapeze,
Trapezii.
and it was like, for someone who's so posh.
Posh. It's got nothing to do with it. I'm an intellectual. That's the important part.
Right, okay, you're not an intellectual. But it's just not a hard word. You managed loquacious.
Yeah, I know.
You managed
That's
the word
weird
loquacious,
thing.
but you couldn't manage trapes. But no one let you off, which is what was really funny. You said trapes, and everyone turned around and were like, "What the hell did you just say?" Which is brilliant.
It's good. I love not being able to live that down. So there you go. That is the read through in very basic terms. I mean, there's nothing really more complex about it. You're not really giving out directorial guidance at that point. It is just kind of seeing how it all comes together and how it all flows, and for everybody to just give it a first look. But all right, so that's the first thing to kind of your first introduction as directors, your first interaction with the cast properly.
Yeah.
It's probably that outside of auditions. So then the next thing doesn't necessarily involve the cast as much immediately, but it's blocking. So what is blocking? If you were to give, imagine I'm really stupid and a little bit hungover.
That's not really imagining, my dear. Right. So one of the things that not all directors do this, but this is something that me and Rory found good, was blocking. So essentially, you have a scene and there's some vague stage directions in it. You know which characters are in it. You know the lines, everything like that. But it's about sort of saying, where's everyone going to stand? So something that's quite big in sort of drama and different Amdram stuff is bus stop. So essentially, if you are running a scene, you don't want all the characters to just be standing in a line along the stage like they're waiting for a bus. Yeah, like, obviously, if the scene was you were waiting for a bus,
that's probably fine.
Then it's probably okay.
But even then, you probably have one or two sitting down and the others standing up.
So it's kind of about, how do you want people to stand? Where do you want people to come in from, leave from? Other things to do with, like, would you want a spotlight moment? It's just kind of, blocking is all about planning kind of what you want the final product to look like, but in very basic skeletal terms. Yeah. Because it's just, especially if you have a lot of walk-on characters like we do in Panto, because we normally have a lot of small parts that everyone, like we said, gets a few lines. There's often a few parts which is literally they'll come on, say a few lines and leave. So you kind of have to work out the most natural way to do something like that. Or if there's something in the scene like a bad guy goes off one way, then the next characters come on and have to chase him. You don't want them to leave the wrong side. It doesn't really make sense. So it's basically just planning for before you would do a rehearsal.
I think it's one of the most frustrating things from being in a show and then also directing it is if you kind of turn up to a rehearsal and you don't know where you want characters I wouldn't know what that's like because I'm so well prepared.
Well,
exactly. I always do my blocking, so it's not a problem for me. But no, it's just really frustrating, and it ends up just being a bit of a waste of time because you end up faffing about a lot. Yeah. And it. I
mean, Eli did say that your rehearsals are a bit chaotic.
Mine were a bit chaotic. No, that was just
put that quote out there.
That was just narration. Narration was a special thing all into itself. We can talk about that when we get onto the rehearsal bit. But yeah, blocking as well it's also when you'll start thinking about lighting and things like that. Yeah. We've got a whole bit about lighting and set design later, but when you go through and do blocking, and obviously you're thinking about where characters are going to be moving to and from on stage, you can also think about what they're going to interact with, what the mood of the scene's going to be, and so you can start kind of thinking how you want the lights to be and stuff like that, and all of that stuff. Start thinking about it early on before you start doing lots of rehearsals and stuff like that, and before you start talking to stage technician people, just so you've got a good, nice, clear direction.
Yeah. I think the most important part is before you go into rehearsal, especially the early ones, is just knowing where people should stand and things like that.
Yeah.
It's incredibly frustrating when you're in a show and the director's kind of like, oh, maybe go there, or maybe do, I don't know. And it's just like, it feels like, if you're truly passionate about something, you know what you want it to look like. Because it kind of feels like the directors and the writers sort of help make the show. It's their baby, their joint freaky baby, you know? And you want to nurture it even though it's a bit of a freak.
Right.
You know where this metaphor's going.
Good. No.
But yeah, it's just better to plan for it. And it's also, people feel better if it's kind of like, it's clear that everyone knows what's going on.
Yeah. So I think do that. And I mean, we're not talking, this isn't like, detailed notes.
Oh, no. It's like a few stick figures.
Stick figure diagrams and like margins of scripts is what are.
Or like little circles with mine that had different like hair on it. So if it was like a princess, it'd have long hair. And if it was like, when it was hair, the rabbit hair, it'd have like bunny ears.
Yeah. We've wow incredible directing. I think, but it is important because I remember we've already talked briefly about my narration scenes for Easter Panto, but the whole setup for them was it was Sherlock and Watson were our narrators along with Mrs. Hudson, and so a lot of the time the set for that was just 2 armchairs, a fireplace, and it was, you know, like one of the challenges was just kind of not having the two of them just sat down talking the entire time, because that gets a bit boring to look at. So made sure they were interacting with each other and other characters and actually moving around in that limited set space. And it's little things like that which you might not be immediately obvious, but when you're actually watching a show, it makes a big difference rather than just having everybody static and at the same level. So yes.
Levels, wow.
Levels, I know. You want some people higher up, some people lower down. It's crazy.
Christ.
I know, we are pretty advanced, if I should say so myself.
I mean, I don't know if you're advanced. I'm the one who had a 5-star panto.
Oh, I'm still 4 stars. Oh, God, I didn't bring you down. The narration scenes were fantastic. Right, moving on. So once you got your blocking sorted, or at least rehearsals, and, you know, so this is, you know, your was it meat and pie? Is that the phrase? Meat and pie?
I've no idea what you're talking about.
The meat and pie of being a director.
I think you're talking out your ass.
One of the main bits. Point is, it's one of the main bits of one of the main things you're doing as a director.
I just see the light dye in your eyes. that you can't tell through, you know.
I'm still seeing life through the haze of Clunge.
God.
It's still very much clouding my mind. I mean, we've talked about Clunge in this podcast. I mean, do people even know what it is?
So, there's Clunge that most people would associate with female genitalia.
No, oh God.
But then
it's
there was
going
a
out on
Clunge
Facebook.
party. Jesus Christ. There was a Clunge party which was basically you could only drink from this container that contained Clunge, which is everyone had to bring an alcoholic beverage and a soft drink and then put it in. I didn't drink any of it because I don't want any kind of disease.
I drank quite a lot.
Oh my God.
I mean, right, so I mean, if this podcast seems a little bit jilted,
I think it's just that's just you. You
okay,
don't even
rude.
look hungover.
There were eggs in it at one point.
Can we not talk about Clunge? Let's get
okay,
back.
Right.
Let's get things back on track. I cannot think about Clunge
I
anymore.
don't want to think
say the
about
word
Clunge
anymore.
anymore. It's just disgusting to say.
Right, get one last one out.
Right, Clunge. All right, rehearsals. So this is one of the main things you're doing as a director.
The meat and pie of directing.
The meat and pie of directing.
I think that's not a phrase.
It's close enough to whatever the phrase is.
Sorry.
So, okay. So what are rehearsals? Go on, break it down for me. Imagine I'm stupid.
I don't have to imagine. Rehearsals are just where you practice for the show. A rehearsal's a rehearsal. I don't really know what else to say.
Yeah.
It's kind of... So how I would run a rehearsal, we can just say it because obviously we probably do different things.
Probably.
I don't always do a warm-up. It depends how much time we have. But sometimes we'll do a little warm-up and it might be a song that Panto does. So we have a song called I Like the Flowers. It might be that. It might be a sort of drama game. I'm sure lots of people kind of know a few games, Zip, Zap, Boing, Splat, things like that. And it just kind of gets people kind of all loosened up, ready to go. And then so in the first rehearsals I did, especially with Shrek, it was... Everyone would just sit down and just read through the lines. Mm-hmm. So we wouldn't do any moving around. It's like, let's just get through the lines and see how it sounds. After that, I would then tell people where to stand for the start or tell people where they're coming in and off. I'd kind of go through all the notes that I'd made for that scene. And then it's a case of they'll start running it and I will just kind of go pause or just tell them no move here, no move this, da-da-da. And I'll interrupt all the way through that one. I'll then give some feedback, get them to do it again without me interrupting, give some feedback, and then get them to do it again without me interrupting. Yeah. So it's just sort of shaping it. I might kind of take someone and be like, no, you need to move over here. Or it might be a case of working out if we're going to have chairs on set, you know, is it a show where you don't have stage text and you need an actor to take it off with you and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's normally what I do, is we'll read through it, I'll then block it physically with all the actors, and then they'll give it a go and I'll give them feedback. And that's how I do rehearsal. Yeah,
no, I mean, it's basically the same for me. I think when we did the Christmas pantomime, the only difference was in my narration scenes, one of the narrators, Mrs. Hudson, so Sherlock and Watson's housekeeper, was also the dame. And so that's how we'd do the rehearsals. And then when the dame had a bit where they had to interact with the audience, I talked to Jamie Davis, who played the dame, and we would kind of talk about how he would interact with the audience, what possible things he could say. But he had like a basic outline in the script, but it was kind of how he'd move around the theatre and stuff like that. Because obviously that kind of takes him off stage, and it's a bit more up to him depending on whoever his victim is.
And how they respond.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was, you know, knowing limits and stuff like that. But for some of the scenes as well, because during the rehearsal, we're talking about what's happening on stage. So, you know, where people are moving on stage, how they're coming on and off it, especially in a pantomime. But I know when I went to see Jesus Christ Surprise Superstar at the Barbican, you know, like the first thing that happened, it was really cool. They had all of their band kind of run through the audience and get onto the stage. And so that's also something else to incorporate into them, being like, we can't rehearse it right now.
That Family Guy sketch when it's like, they're in the audience, so you know it's a good show.
Yes. But especially for a pantomime, we had people running up and down the steps, kind of leading in and out of the theatre. Exactly. It was absolutely excellent. I loved it. It was one of my favourite bits. Having Moriarty being chased by Lestrade and then Mrs. Hudson forcing tea on them. It was excellent.
It was excellent.
But yeah, that's something else to consider when you're rehearsing, that you might, because when we were doing rehearsals, we had rooms booked out in our student union, which weren't the theatre, because the theatre isn't always available for rehearsals. And so it was kind of talking people, as well as actively telling people where to stand on stage and doing that. It's also when they're not on stage and if they're interacting with the audience, guiding them through all of that, which then when you do eventually kind of manage to get a theatre slot, you can then go and practice in actuality then.
I mean, to be honest, a lot of the time with shows like this, you will only get to physically use the stage when you get to the tech, which we're going to talk about later. But a lot of the spaces in the SU are quite small, and it's kind of just letting actors know kind of you will have more space to spread out, or just make sure when you actually go on the stage when we practice, don't all clump together, because that's always a nightmare when people don't spread out, or they all stand at the back and it's like everyone can see you in the audience anyway, there's no point standing at the back. But obviously when you're actually acting, it's hard to tell kind of where you are, what it looks like from the audience, so it's just one of those things.
That's why the tech's so important. But we'll come on to that later. I think for me as a director, the rehearsals, being part of PantoSoc as well, probably one of the things I enjoyed most about the whole directing process, because it was like, you know, after doing the uni degree, stuff like that, kind of do that, and just for 2 or 3 hours a night, just kind of mess around with a bunch of people, tell them what to do, see how they were doing scenes, laugh at them when they messed it up, and then, you know...
And they would laugh at you and they bullied you.
Yeah, well, that's not important.
But yeah, because with Shrek, I directed it by myself, so it was kind of like every night. Oh, I'm hard. So, a la John Coombs. So I was kind of... I had rehearsals every night for like a couple hours, but I don't do uni work in the evening because I've never done an all-nighter, never plan on doing it. Fake student, lol. But yeah, it was really great, and it was also fun seeing it come together, and also of when as you get later into the rehearsal period, you want people to come off book. Yeah. So it's quite fun as well when they're finally, like, when the scripts are down and people are just kind of really going for it, getting to do all the kind of body actions. If you need props and they start getting to practice with those props, it's great. It
is one of my favourite things when people have got to the point where they know the majority of their lines. And sometimes when you're, obviously the first couple of rehearsals can be a bit kind of stunted, just because people are kind of reading off scripts and so they're not really interacting with each other. But as soon as they put them down and they've got into their characters a bit more and they start playing off each other, that's when I really start enjoying it. Especially with PantoSoc, because we don't necessarily do the most serious plays. Everybody's just having such a fun time taking the piss out of each other as well.
Yeah, it's really cute. I love it.
It's so much fun, and I mean, if I had to recommend directing for like one reason, it would probably be that, just because getting to kind of design those situations and get people to interact like that, and it's just great fun.
I mean, my favourite part, the thing that makes it all worth it, is when you get to see the show at the end.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like months of work, and then you see it, and especially with Shrek, the last show you guys did, because Rory was in it as Gaston. The last show that was on, I would have had maybe 2 comments of things that could be fixed, and that was it. It was just, oh my god, it was amazing. It was just amazing to watch. It was so good, and it just was like, wow. It was really weird. It's kind of like relief tinged with sadness, tinged with a lot of like pride.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
Not that you had any comments for me, because it was a perfect performance.
No, yours stopped taking so long to say all your bloody lines.
Look, I didn't have many lines.
Yeah, I know. It's not all about
Let
you.
me enjoy them.
It's not called Gaston the Panto, it was Shrek.
Anyway,
moving on.
One final thing about rehearsal is just like this whole thing about criticism or constructive criticism. After people have run through a scene, something like that, and then I don't want to say do a compliment sandwich. I don't think compliment sandwiches are like, I think they're a dumb way. Just be honest.
Yeah.
You know, just don't be a complete dick about it. I would say.
You don't have to be rude or anything, but it's like, you know, if you don't like what someone's doing, you can tell them.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, we've had criticism when we've done rehearsals recently, and it's fine. You know, like, no one is going to be offended unless you are just an arsehole.
Yes. I think my standout moment, this was one of the Thomas, it was Thomas, So the guy who played Hare in Christmas Panto, and it was like I was giving everybody feedback, and I thought I'd have a little joke with him. I just kind of went to him, Thomas, I just need you to try acting.
Right, that's the sort of thing you say when you're friends with someone, but not if you don't know them very well.
Very clearly a joke. I wouldn't. Yes, don't just go and say that to people. No, stuff
Thomas
like
can act, by the way.
He can. He can act. That's why it was a joke. It was all very funny. But yes.
Wow. Oh, aren't you old?
I know. That's very important. Make sure you do get the criticism in there, because at the end of the day, part of directing, you want to make sure people are doing or kind of building into your vision for the show and stuff like that. And so make sure you are directing that and getting it in that direction.
Because the other kind of risk with pantos, like especially the ones we do, is there are some people who definitely really like to ad-lib, and that's fine, but when you ad-lib every single line you have, I'm gonna be real, it's not funny.
It's like trying to at me at the moment.
I saw a real panto at Christmas, and I think it was like Joe Pasquale or something was like the main guy in it, and it was all of his lines came across as sort of throwaway ones, like, oh, this, like, I just sort of came, and I don't know if that was just part of the acting, it was definitely scripted, but it just was like a bit much, because he was the Buttons character, but it just gets a bit much when it's every line is just like, oh, I don't really care, oh, I'm gonna break the fourth wall, and but it wasn't like in a good way, it was just like, you're not acting, you're just here.
I think kind of rule of diminishing returns as well. It's quite funny, a couple of times, the more you keep doing it, it's a bit like, we get it, it's a joke. But actually, it's quite a good point. So ad-libbing can also cause, although I think in a panto necessary at times for audience interaction, stuff like that, it can also cause issues because of set design and lighting. And sound cues.
I know. Transition.
I'm getting pretty good at this whole podcast thing.
No, you're not.
Okay. But yeah, so set design and lighting are other very important things, director.
Love them.
Yeah, so when you are a director, you will work in partnership with, they're called the SDA at Bristol. Are they called SDA in general?
No, well, it'd be like stage technicians or like your stage manager.
Yeah.
But you'd probably have different teams.
So these are basically the people, as a director, you might want, like, let's say you're doing a dungeon scene like we did, and as opposed to, obviously, it's not a happy time in the dungeon, so you want to get, the right kind of ambient noise in the background, maybe, the right kind of lighting so it doesn't come across as bright and sunny, stuff like that, so like kind of cold blues. And you want, the right kind of set around all of that, so like bars, chains, that kind of thing, to really, make it look like a dungeon.
Wow.
I know. We really
you want to take the audience there?
we really thought this panto through. It was excellent.
Excellent.
It was just like chains in dungeon. Yes, this is groundbreaking. But yeah, and all of that is very important. So let's start off with lighting design. We won't go into too much detail because that could be a whole podcast on its own, like what you want different light colours to do. But basically, when we were doing Christmas panto, what we did was we would talk to members of the SDA, and we would talk about what kind of rig they had set up. And then depending on what the rig they had, so like where they had lighting set up around the stage and where they had different lights shining, would depend on what we do. So like we had a couple of spotlight moments where characters were pouring their hearts out to the audience, and we wanted to emphasize that by dimming all the lights and kind of have a spotlight on that particular position. And so it was talking to them and being like, can we get a spotlight here? Yes, no, this is where the rig would have to be, and this is what it would mean for the lighting and the rest of the show. Because obviously if you've got like a spotlight in one place, you might not be able to have another light in that same place doing something else later on in the show. So that's quite a big thing to think about, I would say, or at least this is what I did, and I think you did as well. Just kind of think about how you want the scene to look, and then when it actually comes down to it, you can normally find ways to make the lighting match it, no matter like kind of what that is and what other lighting is going on in the show.
A lot of the time as well, like I found this especially with Shrek, is that the people who are in charge of the lighting will understand it a lot better than you will.
Oh yeah.
Like, I think you're a bit more into all that stuff than I am, but it was kind of like, I absolutely, don't get me wrong, I absolutely loved doing the lighting and working. I worked with Tom Younger for it, actually. I think he did all the lighting.
For Shrek?
Yeah, for Shrek. But it was kind of like, I didn't know before when we had our sort of meeting and we just sat together for like a few hours and just did everything. I didn't really get the whole cold light and warm light. And don't get me wrong, I think sometimes it is a bit pretentious, and the audience doesn't sit there going like, oh, it's chilly in here.
Yeah.
But it's kind of, you can, by speaking to someone who knows what they're talking about, like Fred from STA, who did Snow White for us. Fred is great. And then with me, Tom, they know what they're talking about, and they can really help kind of build up to what sort of atmosphere you want. So if you want a forest, like sure, greens would be cool, but actors look silly if they've got green in their faces.
Yes.
It washes you out and you just look ridiculous.
Well,
so it's kind of having the balance.
What's Fred's general rule? Unless you're doing Shrek or Wicked, you don't really use green lighting.
Yeah,
It's something like that, isn't it? Yeah. Which
Yeah.
is interesting. But I mean, lighting can also be used to create really cool moments. So like in Snow White the Panto, probably one of the biggest ball aches I had trying to get
God, I know this story.
it was basically we had this really long scene. It should have been 2 scenes, but it wasn't written as it, and so in the middle we have people going from a dungeon walking through a castle and ending up outside. So obviously the lighting for kind of dungeon, kind of dark blues, stuff like that, nice and gloomy, create that kind of atmosphere. And outside in the real world you want it to be kind of happy, bright colours, normal daylight kind of thing. And we also wanted to kind of simulate them walking from the dungeon to the outside world, and so ended up kind of getting this gradual, as the actors marched on the spot, we had a gradual change in lighting going from the left of the stage to the right of the stage to kind of show that. And we had somebody walking along in the background as a suit of armour.
Yeah, he had a little knight helmet on and a big axe.
And holding an axe, which one of the characters needed for plot points. And it all came together quite well, considering there were probably about 12 people on stage at once, all kind of doing their thing in unison, like with the lights. And that all had to be timed, and that all had to be done really, like kind of, we had to time that to get the lights to move across at the right speed and stuff like that. And it was a massive pain. And I think it ended up looking all right.
That's slicing all right.
The only real problem was getting the jail cell off, because we had like physical bars, and that was a bit jarring. But apart from that, I think the lighting worked quite nicely. So you can use lighting to do really cool stuff. Just your imagination is your limit.
Yeah, so like we had the song Paparazzi. So we had Sally and Katie, who were 2 of our like props team. They went and made a bunch of fake cameras out of like flora tubs, toilet roll tubes. Rory just pointed at the one that he stole from the set. I stole one as well. It's in my room in pride of place. I've also got donkey's hooves from Shrek. So,
do you?
Yeah, I do. I have them at home. Anyways, back to the story.
We need to steal more.
Well, yeah, it's just fun to have a memento for like, all your shows. Anyways, they made all these cameras, and the idea of when we were doing paparazzi was they were becoming journalists.
Yeah.
So we managed to have a lot of kind of like flashing lights from the sides. It was all a lot of whites.
Yeah.
Because we didn't want it to be like a colourful kind of pop thing. It was like they're taking pictures, and then we were able to use kind of like some strobe lighting as well in the song Bonkers. And we had a few times where we had like a backlight on, which was really sick. So you just kind of see the silhouettes of your actors, and it just, with certain effects, it works really well. We had an what you say moment, if you're aware of that meme.
That meme, yeah.
And during all of that, when someone had just got stabbed in the show, we had this backlight, and it just made it very dramatic and lovely. So yeah, lighting can be great.
Yeah, especially in songs, because I think you're far more into dance choreo and stuff like that than I am. So
well, you can't dance.
Well, I can't dance. It's irrelevant. But because you did a bunch of lighting for them, but I did, because I remember you were taking a rehearsal, and it was me and one of the guys from the SDA doing the lighting for Bonkers, and it was like we wanted this strobe, like the kind of strobe effect. But the thing is, if you get a strobe light going at the wrong speed, it blinds you.
Yeah,
and so
causes all sorts of issues.
So it was me and Albert basically like trying different speeds of strobe light, trying not to blind ourselves until we found the right one. So that was a painful 10 minutes.
Slightly drooling.
So that was good fun. But yeah, lighting, very important. Don't overlook it, because we've had experience of people kind of not caring, and it's a real shame, because it like all little aspects of any kind of show on stage, it's the little things you might not think about as being important. They really are, especially when you're viewing the thing as a whole. They do make a big difference. That's a big takeaway. Don't overlook lighting, and equally don't overlook sounds. Segue. Don't overlook sounds. So sound design. Do you want to talk about like the different sounds we used?
Yeah, so we didn't get to have an orchestra for this Christmas, which was a shame, but also sometimes it doesn't really work out anyway, so it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
So the sounds we had a lot of sort of background sounds. So for example, the jail scene that we'd spoken about earlier, we had some dripping in the backgrounds and a few other sort of
ambient
noises. But then we also had a lot of transition music. So at the end of a scene with a villain, we had a clip from Dark of the Night, so from the film Anastasia. We also, that was the villain song we had. And with Sherlock, we had Sherlock and Watson as our narrators. So at the start of the show and after the interval when they came back, we had is it called Sherlock? the show? Not
Yeah,
Elementary.
yeah.
Elementary is the American one.
No,
Sherlock
is the
music.
British one.
Yeah, had the Sherlock theme music. So you can kind of use it for transition music. It just makes it a bit less boring when the curtains are closing and when set's changing.
Mm-hmm.
You obviously have music for the songs. Then you'll have, when we had spotlight moments, we had sad violin.
Yeah.
Things like that.
It also covers up when you're transitioning the swearing coming from the people backstage trying to get the set into position.
Jesus Christ, Fenton!
Get off my foot! All of that kind of stuff. But I think so. Important notes about doing sounds. If you're doing stuff like ambient noise, making sure it's not too loud.
Yeah.
Because you don't want that to take away from what the actors are saying. When it's what I think, I can't remember if we did it or not, but it was something I remember thinking about at least, was when the scene first started to kind of have the ambient noise before anybody said anything, like as the curtains were opening, having it louder and then having it fading to quieter so the audience are aware of it and it's always there.
I think that's what we did with a lot of it, was it was kind of like a bit loud at the start and then you kind of just, slowly fade it out so it's still there a bit. But like you said, you don't want it to take away from anyone speaking because not worth it. No.
And much like the lighting as well, making sure it fits the scene. So again, Dungeon wouldn't have made sense to have birds chirping and stuff like that. Yeah. So the ominous dripping was a good choice.
Ominous dripping was a lot. Considering we talked about clunge earlier, I don't like the ominous dripping that we're now talking about now. So.
But finding sounds is great. There are loads of free sound libraries you can use. That's what we did. We had a good laugh browsing them. I think the most infamous thing that we've managed to find is the a cappella version of the Final Fantasy VII fight music that somebody's done. They've done all the voices.
Can we link it below?
We can link it below. We'll link it below. It's incredible.
He put a lot of effort into it, bless him. But it was just... It is a bit much.
It is ridiculous. I mean, because
he's kind of got 5 layers of him singing this theme song, and it's just
no words. It's all just
no words. Ba ba ba. It's a lot.
It's beautiful. I
now love a cappella.
It was a shame we couldn't find anywhere to use it in the panto, but it just tonally it did not work at all.
Yeah, that would have been perfect for the jail scene.
Yes, of course. But I think that's the important thing to remember about sounds. And just when you're actually, again, we'll talk about it in a sec, we move on to tech and dress, but just remembering to get the sound levels right, because if like a sound effect deafens the audience or something like that, or isn't loud enough to be heard, then it can take people out of it. So that's just all important stuff to remember. Something also, sound and lighting, we should talk about points where they can be combined to create something new entirely, a whole visual experience. And we had quite a good example of this in Snow White the Panto, when we had this big backboard which they were projecting colour onto, and we played the sound of a dragon. Obviously we played the sound of a dragon and had a dragon flying across behind the backboard and lit it in a way so that...
So it was like a big cardboard cutout of a dragon that we kind of put in front of the lights, but behind the...
Psyche, that's the one.
Behind the psyche. It's like a big duvet along the back of the stone.
Yeah, a big duvet.
Big sheet.
Oh, God, this is technical.
One sheet is plenty. Yeah. Or we also had it with, when the sword came out the stone, we kind of had a slight spotlight come up on where the sword and the stone was, and then some...
Yeah.
It was great.
That was beautiful. I'm sure everybody really enjoyed that.
Yeah. Rip headphone users when we start streaming.
So, just bear that in mind. Sound and light being used together they can do really good things. And obviously they are being used together most of the time. I'm talking about specific instances where, you're actively using them both to create a specific goal. Just create some really cool moments, like the dragon on the backboard or the sword in the stone.
Or what you say.
Or what you say, yes. That was much nicer. That's not going to cause so much ear pain. Okay, so set design, last bit for this section.
I like this one.
Set design is a bunch of fun. I love
amazing.
Where to even start with set design? I'm kind of like, I guess, thinking about what we want. So like, you go first, and I'll tell you what I did for the narration scenes.
So I mean, kind of how. So at first, already you kind of have a set design sort of briefly talked about in the script usually. So there'll be an idea of, if it's the 7 dwarves, it might say, oh, there's a cottage, or they're inside a cottage. So you're right, okay, I need walls, I might need some chairs, and it's just thinking about where it's all set up at the moment. Then it's kind of thinking realistically what you can do, and then you chat it through with specific people who are going to make the set. So we had a meeting with the Stage Tech Association, so STA, and they have specific people who do set, and it's kind of chatting through with them. They might have a bit of a vision that obviously they know that your word is final, which is good, but like a lot of the time it can be helpful to have someone who knows what can be made and has done a lot of this stuff before, and they can help you come up with designs. So for example, we had a sort of coat of arms for the evil queen.
Yes.
And we decided to have purple be the theme of the evil queen. We kind of decided that with the set people. They showed me a few pictures of different kind of crests they could use, and we picked the one that had a crown in and something else. We didn't want an apple because it didn't make sense for the story to just shove an apple in at the start.
Yeah, which I mean sounds a bit weird for Snow White, but yeah.
Yeah, it contextually, it's like she doesn't talk about an apple at the start. It's just sort of throwing it in because it's Snow White.
Important
so let's
to bear
not do
that in mind.
Yeah. But yeah, did you want to talk about... I have a story about Shrek, so if you want to carry on with your stuff.
Yeah, I would say set is really useful as well for... Well, I suppose in Panto at least, well, no, in all shows, for making it obvious who a character is and what they're like as well. So our narrators were Sherlock, Watson and Hudson, and obviously not traditional Panto kind of characters, and I wanted to make it really obvious who they were, so kind of the audience, they kind of had that bit of background knowledge going in, and so they knew what kind of dynamic to expect, which I think we played into quite nicely. And so when I was doing that, when I was designing the set for the narration, designing the set for the narration, it was a very important job. It was like we kind of went for the classical Sherlock Holmes thing of the fireplace and the armchairs and the kind of old-fashioned lamp, and Sherlock and Watson. We'll talk about costume as well in a second as well, but Sherlock and Watson's attire also matching that, along with the theme music, which we already mentioned earlier, and the and Mrs. Hudson too. It all just really built into this is who these characters are, and this is kind of what to expect from them, and it made it really, like, I remember actually it was maybe in the first or second show that we did, and there was just it was clear that it worked, because when the music started playing, the lights come up, somebody just shouted, "It's the music from Sherlock, are they in
probably
it?"
John.
It probably was John. Goddamn John Coombs.
Your
But
second cousin.
yeah, there you go. But it's really useful for that, making it obvious who characters are, and it can get people excited, as per that one excitable person in the show that we had, which is, it's good. And so bear in mind, set can be used to that goal. It wouldn't have made sense for me to kind of have Sherlock and Watson dressed in these tweed outfits and then kind of giving them ultra modern sofas to sit on and stuff like that. It just
like boring wooden chairs.
Yeah, it just wouldn't have been the same, and so that's just something to bear in mind. It all builds into each other, you know, like if you've got your characters interacting with an environment that just obviously doesn't fit them, then it's going to take people out of it. So set design, very important from that regard. Go on then, what's your story about Shrek?
Okay, so basically, one of the scenes in Shrek was when so the Wizard of Oz characters were in it as a small part, and they were meant to be crushed by a house.
Yeah.
So the script said in it, you know, these characters get crushed by a house. Not sure how you're going to do that in real life. Maybe you could have a tiny house chucked on. And I went, no, we are not having pathetic tiny house thrown on. If we're going to do this, we're going to do this properly. So I had a few meetings with the set team about how we wanted to, because I was like, you know, can we have a house kind of set thing carried on? A couple of people could hold on to it. Like, what are the options? What do we have? So what we decided on was have, I don't know, it was maybe like a 6 foot tall house that was all painted and stuff, and it was cut in half, and behind it had sort of handles that you could just hold on to. So two of the guys in the show who were quite kind of tall and strong, so not Rory.
Not
he
me.
wasn't
Well,
one
no,
of
I was needed on stage probably or something like that.
No, you weren't.
Yeah,
Anyways, so they sort of carried it on. Like, it was quite funny because they carried one at a time, and then the other characters lied down and had this house on top of them that they held for the rest of that scene, which was really funny. But it was really fun being able to sort of have this silly idea, and it was like, because they kind of, I think at one point some of them sort of discouraged the house, and it was like, no, we are having a house, we are doing this, nothing you say will put me off unless we literally cannot do it.
Yeah.
But that was really fun, because like Shrek was only an Easter show, so it has a smaller budget, but I also got to help with designing. We had a big sign to Bristol, because that was part of Shrek's journey, was getting to Bristol. So we painted this roundabout, then it was sort of deciding, right, well, what references do we have? So one of them was Huey was painted on, but I painted over that with red, like put a cross over it so you could still read it, then put a P and a Y on the side so it said Pooey. And I was like, wow, a fun Huey joke.
Sorry, are you the god of comedy? Wow.
I am pretty funny. What can I say? But yeah, it's really fun because, like, on the back of that piece of set was then the fairy godmother, and it had Michael who played the fairy godmother, because it was the Dane character. His face had been stuck on top, so it was like her body all painted, and it was really funny because it would turn around and the audience could see the set turning. They're all going, ooh. Then as the lights come on before the characters join, they all just laughed at the set, and it was great. So yeah, set is it's so much fun. Love it.
There's an important point as well about getting set on and off stage, stuff like that, where it needs to be.
Yeah.
It can be, depending on the type of show you're doing.
It can be a ball ache.
It can be. But I think if you're doing like a serious show, that tackles serious issues and stuff like that, basically something that isn't a panto.
Yeah.
Then having like you had, it was very like it wasn't seamless. It was very obvious. It was two people bringing on these big slabs of wood, and
Yeah,
it was
it
just
was a joke.
Yeah, no, exactly, and it was all
a joke.
it was all quite funny, and that builds into the whole panto thing quite well. Obviously, wouldn't work for probably something that Dram Soul does.
Spring Awakening.
Spring Awakening, but and like similarly in the Snow White Christmas show, when we were getting the jail off, we had like kind of two background people running on and then like sidestepping with the jail off as well.
Yeah,
and,
in tune to some whistling.
Yeah, in tune to the Seven Dwarfs whistling song from Snow White, and so it all just looked a bit ridiculous, and that became a joke in itself. So set as well as everything else, it can be a funny. Definitely don't overlook that. I mean, you see that in like other shows as well. We've talked about Book of Mormon before on the other podcasts, and like I know they do things where it's what was it like? There's a coffee shop and stuff like that, and that's got a funny name. It's just small stuff like that. Again, the small stuff which is just that just builds into the overall atmosphere and feel for the show. So again, really important. Something I haven't got written down, but it's very important to talk about, and is what we will talk about next, is costumes.
Ooh.
Because
this is going to be a long podcast.
What are we at now? 40 minutes? That's
Jesus
fine.
Christ.
We'll do costumes, then tech and dress, and then concluding remarks.
Shut up.
It's just like, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. But yeah, so costumes, important because your actors need clothes to wear.
Wow. Well, that's the comments done.
That's that.
Jeez. I'm allergic to costumes.
Apparently. Well, actually, you might be allergic to costumes. The panto...
Oh, God, claps.
The costumes in the panto sock stores haven't been washed in about 30 years.
No. It's rough.
It's rough.
Yeah, that's one of the things as well, is like, even if you have a small like, luckily with us we have a lot of costumes back up.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily need to like buy new costumes every time. You don't need to have like really fancy stuff. It's very easy to kind of get away with sort of basic things.
Because we did, because the Christmas panto that we did, it came in under budget, didn't it?
Yeah.
And we've then been able to put that money towards, well, hopefully Fringe, unless coronavirus cancels everything, but hopefully Fringe and other things like that. And so it's doable. And I mean, it all looked good. If I might actually link the Snow White Christmas panto underneath this podcast.
Ooh, we could do the thingy, the bar.
The thing,
Oh,
the bar thing.
I don't know if we can do that because we
Wow.
haven't uploaded the video, but we might have something fancy.
Goodness me.
Oh,
Oh,
wow,
look
look
how
at us
professional.
tech savvy.
But yeah, so I mean, first point to make, costumes don't need to be massively expensive. Use what you've got. I think if people get the general idea, they don't have to be anything
and
amazing.
a lot of the time you can ask cast to provide like certain coloured t-shirts. So we normally have chorus members will be in black.
Yeah.
Because that's easier. In some Christmas pantos, that we'll also buy some tinsel, and they can sort of tie that on to make it more Christmassy.
The dwarves in the Christmas panto are a really good example of cheap costumes that are really easy to do.
That were really effective.
Because
so
everybody wore like basically some kind of Primark t-shirt or something like that. That was just
they had a distinct colour
of the dwarf.
And they then one of our dwarves, Eleanor Allen, who played Doc, she made all the hats. I think.
Yeah, just out of felt or something
out
like
of felt,
that.
She made these very basic hats. Like it didn't take too much time, I don't think.
We can put pictures up or something,
prop
maybe.
people also made like their names.
Yeah.
All in their colour as well. They coloured it in, so it was really nice. And then just like black jeans and shoes, and you're done.
And that really wasn't difficult, but it looked really good because I mean it's not a professional production or anything, and it worked.
Yeah, you could see who they all were. It was really good. Loved it.
And so costumes important again, much like with the set, with the lighting, everything like that. Think about the kind of themes you got going on with that character, whether they're supposed to be evil, whether they're supposed to be good. When you're thinking about what colours to make costumes and stuff like that, just so you don't have anything massively jarring, like unless it plays into the character. So if you've got somebody being a bad guy and you've got them coming on in bright yellow or something like that, maybe not the best idea unless it's part of their character.
Unless they're a banana.
Unless they're an evil banana, exactly. Oh my god, we'll have to write we'll write that down. But yeah, just stuff like that. Just with everything else, make sure it fits. And if you're wondering whether or not it fits, ask somebody else.
Yeah, not Rory though, because he has no idea.
I'm very talented actually, so you can ask me anything.
Moving on.
Oh no. So that's a brief thing about costumes, set design, lighting. Good, that's all of that. So once you have done the blocking, then you've gone and done the rehearsals, and then you've gone and talked to the SDA. You've gone and put your lighting and your sound all into a big motherboard that is then queued up to the stage you're actually going to be doing the show on and stuff like that. Then it is time for the tech run. Amber Saunders, what is a tech run?
So you don't normally do a full run of the show. The tech run is more for the benefit of the stage technicians.
Yep.
And also like the sort of production team, mostly the stage technicians. So essentially what they'll do is it will be the stage managers in charge, and people will be on stage. You don't need to be in costume, but you do need to have things like props. It's so that we can see that things work practically and safely as well. So there's normally a safety briefing if we have pyro, which we did.
Yes.
So we didn't really mention that. So some shows will have pyro, so it doesn't necessarily mean loads of fire, but it might be, we had these mini sort of fireworky things.
Boy band sparks, I believe they're called, the technical term, something like that.
Okay. So, you know, things like that for safety. It's kind of for the stage tech to know that everyone on stage is going to be sensible, knows how to be safe on stage, how to get on and off. So often you'll start doing a scene, and then the stage manager will go, yeah, all right, can you skip to the line that says goodbye?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the actor has to be like, oh, okay, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
Which is normally quite jarring, but it kind of normally takes like a whole day. It's quite a long, tiring day.
We spent like 12 hours in the...
I mean, the actual tech
like
wasn't that long. We spent that long doing the
lighting cues and
so
stuff like that.
Yeah, we spent like 10 to 12 hours just on lighting and sound the day before. But it didn't mean the tech went really smoothly.
Yes.
Like someone said that it was the smoothest tech they've been to for Panto.
Ooh, what we
like for Christmas, because Christmas before I did one, I think my first year, and we got there at like 10. It didn't finish till like 10 or 11.
Yeah.
It was like, it was horrible.
I think...
So part of that is you want good planning going into a text, that you're not exhausting your actors the week of the show as well.
Yeah, well, I think it's just a kind of good takeaway for all of these points. Just plan as much as possible, and then because when it comes to stuff like this, it makes it all just run so much smoother. Because it was a really good first experience for me directing, just because the SCA are really good to work with, and they were just like, oh my god, you've had so much thought through.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It was really sweet when I did Shrek, and they gave me this card and like said thanks and stuff, but they were like, this is one of the smoothest shows you've done. And I was just like, oh, I'm so glad I've not pissed you off, because I pissed myself off enough. I can't cope if it's you too.
I mean, at times I think it does get a bit tense, especially when you're working, because obviously
you're all tired.
Yeah, we're tired, and also we don't necessarily understand all of the systems and processes they've got going on. So it's like, well, why can't you just move that 3 seconds earlier? And it's just like, you don't understand. I got 3 other things queued. It's not that easy. And it's like, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but it's kind of like both sides understand. But it's like during the tech, I know one of the stage guys was getting a bit annoyed at some of the actors. Oh no, they were getting annoyed at you because you wanted to run the jail scene.
Yeah.
But it was the scene where we had the gurney. So Snow White was in a gurney for some scenes, and I had to be like, well, we asked you guys for the gurney weeks ago, and you refused to give it to us. You said you'll get it on the tech, so you can wait. You know.
Yeah.
This is the first time they've ever used it, and it's very important they can move it around so it's safe.
Yeah.
Don't come for Rory. I was your wing. I was your fucking your protector. I was trying to think of a word.
I thought you were going to hit me then. You're raising your arms.
Oh, I was very annoyed. But yeah, he was like, oh, okay, yeah, fine.
Yeah, but I mean stuff like that, and I think as well it just makes it even more satisfying when it all kind of works in a show, and it's like, I'm so glad that we did do all this because it looks good. And that gurney was a nightmare because it had one booky wheel.
It didn't have one wheel. It had one set of brakes. It had 4 wheels.
Okay,
it didn't have.
It had all the wheels.
You meant one wheel was bad.
As in one wheel was booky. Jesus Christ.
You said it. All you said was it had one booky wheel, and it comes across like it's just a bed
Snow White's being
and one wheel in the centre, and she's just having to like balance her body to stay afloat.
Brilliant. But yeah, it's stuff like when you're doing the tech as well, very important, because obviously you're trying out all the sound effects and stuff like that. Obviously we were 2 directors, so it was quite useful. Like Amber might be quite near the front, I'd be quite near the back, and then as well as making notes on what the actors are doing and stuff like that, we can also gauge the audio for people in different areas of the audience, stuff like that. Or if the
sound needed to be louder, because some of the music was way too quiet, so we had to be like, sound guy, please.
Oh, please. And so it's just stuff like that, and that is why it is so useful, and it was so good. And yeah, so that's basically what a tech is. And obviously we tried the pyrotechnics. We didn't touch upon them earlier when we probably should have. But yeah, it's just if you've got fire on stage, something like that, because we were also going to have smoke coming out. Something didn't happen in Snow White when there's a scene where they go and see, was it Merlin or Gandalf?
Yeah, Merlin.
It was Merlin, and they were taking the piss out of Gandalf. Anyway,
yeah,
they were going to have
more like Gandilf, my right, ladies. That was the line.
That's a line.
Yeah. That was in our Panto.
Oh boy,
Jesus Christ! Thank you, Louisa.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
But yeah, and they were going to have a smoky cauldron that was going to be, Merlin was like making a potion for plot points, and it was in the end, it kind of got to the tech and they just couldn't do it, and so we had to think
abandon
about
it and just have a light,
and that was fine. But
it was sad though.
This is why having a tech is necessary, because obviously if that happened the day of the show, it would have been a nightmare. It would have been a nightmare. So just more reasons to do it, more reasons why it happens, and really make use of it. And I think don't as well. As a director, be assertive. If you want to try something, having something a bit louder or a bit quieter,
you just have to say.
Just make sure you say it. Nobody's gonna get angry at you. They understand that. And
if they do, they can bore off.
Yeah, they can go away. Look how polite we're being. We wouldn't normally talk like this.
Lol.
Okay, so that's basically what a tech is. Mm-hmm. What about a dress? What are the differences?
So the dress is, you run it as if it's a real show. So you have all the costumes, all the props. There's no pausing. There's no us interrupting to tell them to do something. It is as if it's a real show. The other good thing about a dress, which we did, was one of our producers borrowed a camera. I think Nina borrowed the camera off Eli or Charlotte or something. So one of our producers, Nina, was taking a bunch of pictures. So it helped with advertising as well, because we had a bunch of really cool pictures. And because she kind of knew the show, she knew where to stand for different things.
Yep.
So we got a really cool picture of Merlin when he moved his staff. And there was a spark. And Nina managed to get it right when the spark came up. So those can also be used, like when Epigram do reviews of shows, they often ask for pictures.
Epigram is our student newspaper, just FYI.
Yeah, so we managed to have, a review that had really cool pictures in it as well.
Yeah.
4-star review.
But
yeah, the dress is basically just as if it was a show, but there's obviously no audience. It's just directors and producers in the audience.
Yep. And it was good fun, and it's just as well. I think one of my favourite things about the dress as well is seeing how people are handling it kind of properly on the proper stage for the first time, rather than the rehearsal rooms and stuff like that. And just kind of, I think at least for the Christmas dress that we did, just watching it all kind of come together, and I was like, finally, I'm so happy. It's good. It's all coming together, and it's a really satisfying feeling, because by that point you've got the lighting and the special the pyrotechnics and everything. It's just so cool. So I think probably the dress, probably one of the most enjoyable points after the rehearsals for me, just because you get to see it all come together as a director. Mm-hmm. It's good. But that's what a dress is. Then after that, all it is the shows.
Mm-hmm. And then, you didn't do this, but I take all my notes.
You take all your notes. You do. Well, I mean, if there was anything glaringly obvious and wrong, I was going to pick up on it. But you were making lots of little notes for the shows, and I didn't do that.
Yeah, so what I normally do, I did this with Shrek and with Snow White, is I'll have a notebook, and apart from the last show, because obviously you don't need feedback after that one, I would sit there, and whenever I notice anything not right, I just jot it down, because sometimes it might be like a cue didn't work, and it's like, right, do we need to tell the stage managers, like, where did that go, what happened? Sometimes it might just be someone came on without prop. So that happened with one of our shows, actually, that people came on without cameras, and it's not super noticeable, but it's like paparazzi, everyone was supposed to have a camera. Is it that we don't have enough? Did someone put them on the prop table? Did someone not? So it was like, we needed to say to the cast, like, right, where do the cameras go? Let's decide right now. Do they go on the table? Do they go on the newspaper stand? Where do we have them? And it's sometimes even like, it's quite nice, because you can give people compliments as well. Like, the notes don't have to be all like, oh, this went wrong.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes it will just be someone really stood out as doing an amazing job, or someone like absolutely nailed one of their lines, or something went a bit wrong but they were able to kind of recover it. Like Megan Green like nearly fell over leaving as Finn once, so she made a really funny comment like, oh, didn't fall over this time, when we next came on the stage. And it's like I know when I've been in shows before, when someone said like, oh, Amber, you did this really well, you just feel so good about it.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you've like, all the actors do hella work as well. Obviously, they're all in the show, they're doing it, they're the one that you're watching.
Yeah.
So it's nice having being told that you are doing a good job. I
think, this was, especially when after shows and stuff like that, or in the interval, it was very much kind of, not that we were doing two completely different things, but I was keeping people pumped up and getting people excited. You're giving out notes. It was a very good dynamic, and I think people just got a lot out of having two of us. Another good reason to have two directors.
Yeah, Lord Darkness and Creech.
Lord Darkness and Creech. I love Elven Quest. I'm not your Creech. I'm not. Yeah, you are. I don't know if I want to be Lord Darkness either. That's a niche reference for anybody listening. I mean,
for anyone listening, all of the maybe up to 30 views this will get.
Actually, we're basically internet famous. We got like 56 views on the first one.
That's all Charlotte.
It's all Charlotte, just because we mentioned her once, and
she was like, I need to listen to it again.
Imagine how many times she's going to listen to this one. So anything, I think that's all of my notes. Those are all the big points to take away. So quick summary then, just for people who might actually use this for guidance. Imagine. So, first thing to do, read through, kind of see how everybody's getting into their characters, stuff like that. Next thing to do, make sure your blocking is prepared. Start thinking about lights, sounds, the different kinds of set you want, things like that, where people are going to be moving, so that when it actually comes to the rehearsals, you're well prepared and you know what you're doing, and they go smoothly, basically. And then...
Well, during rehearsals, you'll normally talk to people about set design, lighting, props. So that's like kind of things we didn't say is like, we'll probably talk about it when we do producing or talk about producing, but you also kind of have your fingers in all the pies of choreography, props, costumes, all that stuff.
We'll talk about that in the producing one.
But
so then obviously set design and lighting, just
physically setting it up, having it all ready.
Good. And then
your tech, your dress,
finish
your
off with
shows.
tech and dress.
They often say what shit tech, great show. I don't know, something like that.
Do they? Are you making up sayings now?
No, like Megan, someone said it was like shit dress, good show. Like you can afford for the dress run to go wrong, and often they do. Because you've got no one saying, oh, that's not right.
Yeah. So I think then just a couple of closing remarks about being a director in general. Criticism, you're not being mean to people. You're just getting them to do the right thing, but don't be a dick about it. Do it the right way.
So, for example, instead of me going, Rory, you look ugly, I could be like, oh, that's an interesting shirt. No, I'm kidding.
That doesn't work at all. You're just slagging me off. That's not a good example.
No, do not do what I just did. If you have a Rory in your life, just treat him badly.
Make sure to keep him well fed and watered, though. He does enjoy food. I think another just one of my favourite bits about being a director, something I really got out of the rehearsals as well, was just when people start getting into their characters and they have their own ideas about what like that character might be doing.
You and your sick kicks.
What?
Well, this is what I get out of rehearsals. Oh yeah.
Shut up. Listen to what like the actor. So like when people, especially because narration rehearsals, there are only 3 of us in there most of the time, or 3 actors, and so like, but this is quite a Sherlock thing to do. What if I did this? And I take it on board. If it was a good idea, we'd try it out. If it worked, it was great.
If it didn't work,
then we would bin it off. But if it did work, it was good. And I think that makes the show a lot more enjoyable for everybody involved, because you're still keeping your vision for the overall thing, but they're bringing their own little bits to the character.
And that's what makes it special.
Exactly, and that's what makes it
more
special.
real. Like the characters are more, they're less kind of boring if they have proper personality.
Yes. Although of course there are limits. Obviously, you can't change a line so much that you miss lighting cues. Can't really mention that. But I think that's quite a sweet note to end on. Work with your cast. They can bring their own element to a character, and it really helps bring a show together.
Your show family, as it were. We were the big cheeses.
We were
the
the big
mummy and
cheeses.
daddy.
Right. Good night, children. Have a
night.
good sleep. That's what a wholesome way to end.
Yeah. So for Charlotte, when she listens to this at 3 a.m,
it's like happy 100th listen, Charlotte. You keep it going, girl.
She's gonna go nuts with all these shout-outs.
Yeah, no, she's gonna love it. All right. Any questions? Leave them in the comments.
Not that we'll get any.
Not really,
but we'll think about answering them.
And in case you're worried about us, we're handling the internet fame quite well.
Yeah.
Quite well. I did go
Nothing has changed.
When I only managed to get a packet of 35 cocktail sausages in Sainsbury's instead of the 40 the other day, and I said, do you even know who I am? And they said no. I didn't take it to heart. It was fine.
Yeah. There was only 1 tier into your 35 pack of cocktail sausages instead of 40.
Anyway, thanks for listening, everybody. Leave a question in the comments, like it, whatever, all that kind of stuff.
Make sure to wash your hands. That's a general comment.
Is this coronavirus thing? Oh, that could be on the tags.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah, keep safe, everyone.
Keep safe. And yes, goodbye. See you soon.
Bye.